occasionally, and there will be somebody else here next week. But I look forward to today. I'll just wait till you all kind of get settled in and we get to see you. I need to click on a couple of things. Did everybody have a good week? Good.
It's cold.
Sorry, Jonathan. What did you say?
I'm just saying it was cold. It was
Oh,
cold this week. I'm doing my Florida bicycle thing, and I was on the coast, and everything was all nice and wonderful, a little gray but warm. And then I had to shoot into Tallahassee, a cold front hit me, and so I've been like freezing.
oh no.
But
Oh,
yeah,
yeah. I have family in Canada, and it's been pretty bad up there as well. But Florida, you don't anticipate that kind of cold. We've had a little bit
no,
of our share here in LA, but we're hitting a warm week, I understand. So everybody go out and enjoy it. So good morning. And I am going to take you first to the blessing. I like to begin. Let me share it. So before we start studying together, there's our beautiful ancient Torah. And I invite you to mute. It gets a little difficult when we hear everybody at the same time, but if you don't mind muting, and then if you wish to join me, please let us do the blessing that reminds us, that when we have something as joyous or as meaningful as Torah study, we bless God. We bless God a lot. The rabbis teach us we should be doing 100 blessings a day. That's the goal. So let's begin with this one. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok, to soak up b'divrei Torah. So let's see what we can soak up today. I'm going to I will show you one image in a few moments to get a feeling for what we're talking about. So we are in the portion Mishpatim, which is Exodus 21:1 through 24:18. And it opens with the words Va'ele hamishpatim. So I assume Dawn is doing the admittance. And I'll pay attention to my notes here because I wrote extensively. Vit is really an important letter. It's one of the few letters that represents a whole word. I mean, we have some other letters that represent prepositions, but this one is really important. So what it's saying, and these are the ordinances. So we're now facing the laws, you could call them laws, ordinances, rules. And we have just come off of Yitro. We talked last week and really focused on one of the commandments, which had to do with Shabbat and the emergence of Shabbat and the importance of Shabbat. But Yitro is really a very, very powerful Torah portion, because one of the key things that happens is the most astounding, miraculous, phenomenal sensory experience. The power of coming to Sinai and the experience at Sinai is beyond imagination, truly. And these people who have come, they've seen the power of the Holy One, by being protected from Pharaoh's army, by crossing the sea, They witnessed the plagues. And now they stand at this mountain, and what do they see? They see smoke, they see fire, lightning, thunder, and this ever increasing sound of the shofar. And then, of course, the voice of God with the 10 commandments. They have experienced something that is called synesthesia. Some of you heard that word, synesthesia. Their senses are totally reversed. They hear the images and they see the sounds. Now, talk about a discombobulation. They're totally taken off the level of being grounded, of balanced. Everything is turned upside down. The power of the experience is, in many ways, really frightening. And basically, they say to Moses, as you know, you go talk to that God, because if we continue hearing God and being in God's presence, we're going to die. I mean, can you imagine how extreme the experience was? They actually felt they were going to die. So, of course, Moses goes up the mountain and he gets the tablets with the commandments, and he gets to be close to the Holy One. And then after all of this power and in some ways trauma, they're sort of left with a little of PTSD. And not only that, one of the things that's so remarkable is that the people reject God in that moment. They're basically saying, go away. You know, I wrote a book on the Mishkan, on the importance of the whole project of the Mishkan, which is what comes next, by the way, after some of these rules, which is fascinating because my perception was that as slaves, they had 400 years of trauma. And, you know, the research is now proving that people, when we talk about the Holocaust, children, grandchildren of survivors, they end up with something called epigenetic trauma. That somehow we pass down trauma, negative feelings, grief. We just pass it down. And 400 years of slavery is going to have a huge impact on someone's life and their future. So these people have this PTSD when they leave Egypt. They're given this liberation and this freedom, but they're carrying inside of themselves a tremendous amount of pain and loss and suffering. And then there needs to be some kind of healing for that. And my whole theory, and I'll leave it at this, is that the Mishkan itself was a project to help in that healing. But not only that, and there are a lot of questions about when God wanted the Mishkan and when God told them. But one of the readings is that in this moment, when the people reject God in Yitro, okay, we'll talk about Mishpatim in a minute. In the portion last week, in rejecting God, imagine how God feels. If you can empathize with this being, this power, this unseen, mighty, universalistic experience, what it felt like after doing all of these incredible things for these people. And they basically say, go away. And, you know, in my book, I called it a first date gone bad. You know, those dates that we may have had at some point, first date, blind date, and it just doesn't go well. And I know with people who are doing all this online dating, many of those experiences are just lousy. They're not exactly what they anticipate. But if you can imagine that the story of our people is based on the coming together of God and the slaves who were released and liberated, it's all based on that coming together and creating a covenant. And at that moment, God is basically told, just go away. You scare the hell out of us. Because the language is very clear. They basically say to Moses, we can't be with this being because we will die. That's so profound after all the miracles they've seen and where they've come to. So one of the theories is that the Mishkan itself was a way to heal the relationship. God realized that in that power, it wouldn't work. There had to be another way for the people to come to meet God and to further the relationship. And so the Mishkan became a vehicle, this traveling sanctuary. That was one of the ways in which God found that could be a little more human, a little more down to earth, which is what it was. However, here we are. They've gone through all of this. Moses has gone to speak to God because they can't do it. And the first thing that happens after, we're now in this portion following all of this power and splendor and awe. And the first thing that is said is Va'ela hamishpatim. When you think about it, it's a little bit anticlimactic. We've had this huge thing occur, and then God says, well, these are the laws. These are the ordinances. So I wanted to paint that picture to you because so much of what Torah teaches or is available to us is through the experience of being able to feel it, to imagine it. You have to put yourself into the minds and the imagination of a people thousands of years ago. If you want to understand, that's what Passover does. You know that. The Seder itself, what does it say? Ki'ilu, these important words, as if. You need to imagine as if you were slaves coming out of Egypt. I've always taught that those words were really important because what Judaism teaches us is the importance of empathy. That is such a key value. And how do we learn this? By ki'ilu, as if. Imagine as if. So you have to try to imagine what it's like to be these people standing at Sinai, having gone through this uproarious, awesome moment. And then the next thing that happens is a little bit mundane, but necessary, of course, with these opening words. And the and, tells us what? That Yitro and Mishpatim are connected. That's an important thing to understand. And I would say frequently we will have a portion that begins with the V. And we can't take it lightly. Whatever happened previously is somehow connected and important. And I guess one of the things I wanted to point out, and we'll talk a little more about it, Judaism is both a left brain and a right brain experience. Now, nobody knew in those days left brain, right brain. Obviously, that's a discovery that comes in modern times. But, mysticism and Kabbalah, if you know anything about it, focuses on each one of us being what they call an Eitz Chaim, a tree of life, which is what the Torah is called, with a right side, a left side, and a center column. and both the right side and the left side have a purpose. And Yitro is a right. Yeah, just give me a sec, Eric, and then we'll hear you. The right brain experience is experience. Right. The left brain is much more about knowledge and content. And Yitro and Mishpatim are joined together by the Vav because Judaism is telling us we have a right brain and a left brain experience in Judaism. Yes, Eric, please.
I saw a picture of the Ten Commandments on the ark, and it was two hemispheres when they're in the thing. So when I did a drash in another synagogue, I said, "Oh, the left brain is for certain things, and the right brain is for something." There was on the left brain, I saw that it was a relationship with God and man, and then the other side was a man-to-man relationship. There was two lessons in the two hemispheres.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's a wonderful perception. It's interesting because the tablets are kind of split and it's like one side and another side. And much of what the latter five is about is really what goes on human to human, and what goes on the other side is a little more connected to the divine. So yeah, that's a beautiful perception. The idea that we really live in life experiencing and learning, that's such an important thing to understand. The right brain is the creative, the innovative, the spontaneous. That's what Yitro, in a way, presents to us, a very right brain experience. And the left brain is what we're meeting here in Mishpatim, because this side of our brains are about learning, gaining knowledge, understanding. So I'll read to you what I wrote. We go from the awe-inspiring experience of God and the covenantal relationship in the right, which is experiential. That's such an important word. Experiential things really affect the right side of our brain. And now we're coming to the left brain, the place of learning and knowing, understanding, and turning the people into a society with civil guideposts on how to live. You know, the hows, the whats. About engagement and ways of being together is what we're now being presented with. What felt like spiritual, which is what they got, and it terrified them because it was very powerful, now becomes about information and guidance, laws that create a pathway for the human beings, and to create expectations built around morality and ethics and compassion, learning how to be with other people and what's expected, what the limits are and what the pathways are. I wanted to share something with you because there is a midrash. Let me just share this image, which is an interesting concept around choice and freedom and responsibility. Let's just move this. If you can see this, this is an image that comes out of a midrash that you can read down here. They took their places at the foot of the mountain. Tacha is really below or underneath. Exodus 19. So that's back in Yitro. It teaches that the Holy One, blessed be He, turned the mountain upside down. This is a midrash, that God turned this mountain upside down over them like a tub and said, if you accept the Torah, well and good, and if not, you're going to die here. You're going to be buried here. And so this image is very powerful, and it is it creates a discussion because of this midrash. Were they forced to accept and do what God was presenting? And here you see this image, and it says, this is the thunder and the lightning and the smoke, etc. The experience, of course, is very, as I said, right brain. It's an experience because it's sounds and images, and this part of their brain and body is being pulled to that moment. And now we come to, let me move this now that you've seen that. Now we come away from kind of experience into, okay, things that need to be known. And of course, this opening vav, which says, well, and these things are as important and connected to you in becoming a people as what you just expected. They learn about consequences. They learn about what is required. They learn about what rules and boundaries are. And what do we begin with? The opening statements are all about slavery. It's like, okay, this is the first thing God wants to talk about. But if you're going to do what I talked about, which is identify and have a little bit of compassion, empathy for who these people are at this moment, 400 years of slavery just doesn't disappear because you're released and you can go or you can come. There is something that the rabbis talk about, and we talk about now in psychology, and I always have felt that the rabbis were the original psychologists. They were brilliant. They had an understanding of human behavior in a way that is quite remarkable. Okay, for thousands of years ago, it's remarkable. But they understood about something called slave mentality. And I think we sort of touched on it a little bit in terms of the way we live. And in our day and age, if I said to you, how do we live out a slave mentality right now in our lives in the world? Does anybody have a sense of that or what that means? What are we enslaved to? Yeah, Rebecca.
Well, typically we're enslaved to our phones. We're constantly looking at our phones. We can't put them down.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm old enough to remember phone booths on the street, landlines at home. If I needed to call my parents, I had to go to someone's house or I had to have change in my pocket. The idea of cell phones and what we've gotten used to living with is just unbelievable if you've lived in a different time frame, which many of you have, right? You're like me. You remember a time before the cell phone, our children, our grandchildren, well, even our children, like my kids didn't have cell phones because they weren't around. But my grandson, he doesn't know the world without a cell phone, as many people do. And many of us have become addicted to them, and we can't live without them. I mean, on some level. Yes. Somebody wanted to say something? Howard, go ahead, Howard.
I think one of the most important characteristics of what some people call the slave mentality is an attitude within the culture of waiting for the authorities to do things and expecting if something's bad, like there's a pile of garbage on the street that says, oh, somebody should clean that up, as opposed to going and cleaning it up. And it relates to people who, for example, culturally don't start businesses. They're exploited by people of other non-slave mentalities who say, "Oh yeah, we're gonna open a store and sell things to these people because there's an opportunity here." So that's the big difference between the left brain and between the slave mentality and not. To me, it shows that Jews don't really have a slave mentality in that respect.
Well, yeah, some people can function independently and can make choices. And there are other people who can't, who really are followers and determined by what other people do and how they lead. Eric, yes.
Oh, I'm talking about the cell phone, but that's my lifeline because
Mhm.
I'm doctor forbid me to drive because I may have had a stroke and the stroke caused the accident. I'm not sure, but my cell phone is linked to having taxi service and groceries and everything. But being back to the slave mentality, it is something like the brother's keeper. That I was wrestling with that. And when you're a keeper of somebody, you restrict their freedom. All that stuff. I am restricted now, no driving, so I have to rely on other people to do things for me. So I'm a slave to my drivers and everything because I can't make my own schedule up because I can't drive. I have to be beholden to them for their schedule to make me go to the doctor and shopping
Yeah,
because I need.
that's dependency. That's a little different. There are realities in which we do depend on other people in order to help us. And I did want to say before you mention that it is a double-edged sword. It is this little miracle, obviously. When if I'm out at night, I'm going to Wilshire to teach. It's dark. I had to get some gasoline and there was nobody else at the gas station. And actually having my phone with me made me feel a little safer. And knowing that if I'm in trouble, I can reach out to somebody. It is a double-edged sword. It is unfortunately designed, as I think I mentioned to you, that when the phones were being created, psychologists were hired by the companies because they did want to find a way to make people feel dependent, enslaved, and you can't live in this society without one. It's like oh, so many of the things in our lives that we have to have. Yeah, Jonathan.
Well, I mean, if you think about slavery in its grandest definition, it's anything or anyone that is imposing its will on you that you can't get away from, that you don't want to follow. And so that can be, we talk about cell phones, but you can be a slave to any addiction, which you
Absolutely.
mentioned. But then also you can be along with that, since we are creatures of experience, we can be enslaved by our past. And you mentioned like PTSD and trauma and stuff like that. There's a famous quote from Carl Jung: uh, "I am not my past. I am whatever I choose to be." And so a lot of us, when we have traumas, negative experiences in love or in work or whatever, well, a real simple, the simplest one is I ordered a pizza from Domino's and I got food poisoning, so I will never have pizza from Domino's again. I cannot have pizza. That's sort of the simple thing of just being controlled by a past event. And in love and in work and in life in general, we can be beaten down by negative experiences, which enslave us to that attitude.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah, a man who's been unlucky in love becomes a misogynist, for instance, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're
And
right.
and so breaking that, becoming free can be breaking away from the past and past traumas too.
Oh, absolutely. Look, that is a lot of the work that we do as we grow and age, expand. The things from our past that still have a hold on us, the kinds of perceptions and beliefs that we carry that, keep us limited, the addictions that are in our lives that do have control. There's no question that there is a lot of things in our lives that many people spend a lot of money in therapy, or doing spiritual practice and finding, ways to help them move through it and to, get rid of the chains, so to speak, realistically, because we have a slave mentality. And what I wanted to follow up with is that, the Rambam talked a lot about why was even slavery in any form continued at that time when God had the power to just, eliminate it, which isn't what happens. There is this shift in Mishpatim, which is what I was going to talk about, that happens in the approach. Because, as I said, the rabbis, and I think God, being the master psychologist of all, understood that you just can't get rid of certain kinds of behaviors or your past or habits like that. It doesn't happen overnight for nobody. And there was this understanding that Rambam is teaching us, that God understood these people could not be freed overnight. It was a process. That slavery itself in Torah exists in a different form, what we might call indentured servants. So, which is what I wanted to explain. A reframing and a shifting of the idea of slavery into something more like a servant with a master. And it was really a vehicle. It was a vehicle for people to be able to undo certain things. If you couldn't pay a debt, oh, well, you had an opportunity to kind of work it off. If you accidentally did something inappropriate, not to the level that you might be judged and put in prison, you had an opportunity to make amends and do what we often call now teshuvah. If you made a mistake, you had an opportunity to go and work it off. But the shift of the kind of slavery they knew in Egypt was now being massaged and shifted and changed in a way that the people could probably slowly understand. But it's major. It's only a couple of months ago that they're shackled, so to speak, and in the control of Pharaoh. Now it's a different kind of control, but it has a purpose and a meaning. So the indentured servant now replaces the slave. And yeah, Eric, you made a comment about being slave to your own mental illness, to your own realities. All of us have certain realities that we live with, and we work through our lives to kind of shift and to change them. And the beauty of Judaism is it understands that. And there are many more laws that I'm going to talk about. But the idea of making a society, creating a society where things were possible to really, that concept of do something and then you could move away from it. If you hadn't a servant who worked for 6 years, that was one of the laws in Mishpatim. I had a whole list of them actually that I was going to share, but in the 7th year of being, in quotes, an indentured servant, you had to let them go free. This wasn't anything these people were used to, but it was limited. They were not bound for life into a servitude. They paid their due. The term eye for an eye wasn't that you would throw a rock at somebody and then they'd throw it back at you. It was truly finding an appropriate way for people to make amends and do it in terms of the amount that would service whatever the problem was. So let me share some more things here. That Mishpatim offers. So some of the other things that are it, along with this shift in the opening, around servitude, and I do believe it begins there because that's where they are. God begins where their reality is. And then it talks about, also don't forget that there's the creation of these sanctuary places. If you killed somebody accidentally, and accidents happen, you didn't deserve to be put in prison and then killed. No, you were given an opportunity actually to go to a sanctuary city because the family might want to hurt you, do harm to you. And you were safe if you went to the sanctuary city. And we understand that those exist as well nowadays for immigrants, right? Where they should be left to have a place of solace. But we have a government, obviously, that is just the opposite of what we're learning in Mishpatim. We have the creation of laws. Laws, it means that there are rules that need to be followed. And we have a government that, in which the people who are the leaders don't really want to follow the laws. They want to break them. And it's also a society that's being created where compassion and care is inspired by the rules and the laws, like leaving the food, that falls off the trees, don't touch it, leave it, so that the stranger in your midst or the widow or the orphan can actually come, have a little bit of a sense of being able to be taken care of, and nobody is going to point fingers at them. No idolatry. Big shift from Egypt. The people really need to understand, I'm offering you an opportunity to be in covenant with me, but that means we both participate. The midrash that I showed you is very interesting because in a way, what it's saying is the people were threatened into doing. The fear of God was put in them. If you don't follow these, I'm dropping this mountain on top of you. It's such an interesting midrash because it's accusing the people or even God for promoting fear and threatening them in order to get them to do what they needed to do. It's fascinating that the rabbis write, and some of them feel that the people were really kind of coerced, right, into doing it. No lying or perversion of justice, and no taking bribes. Well, that's interesting. We live in a time when we see all of that happening. It's pretty distressful, but Judaism presents immediately in the creation of a society. Don't lie, don't pervert justice, don't take a bribe. Everybody needs to be treated equally. And, Lady Justice is blind. The leaders and the judges need to be fair and objective. We're reminded about kashrut, about observing the Shabbos, the seventh day of the week, as well as the sabbatical year, which I mentioned, where when the land had its own Shabbos, the seventh year was a time for the land to just rest the way we do on Shabbat. And then, of course, the sharing of the food for the poor, for the people who needed it. The law of the 3 festivals, the Shalosh Regalim, is presented pretty early on. They've had a taste of Passover, right? Their first Seder was in Egypt. So Shavuot and Sukkot are included early on. They don't even know what that really means yet, right? They've barely become a people and a community, and they're now told that 3 times a year they're going to come somewhere and make offerings. 42 times is expressed that we were slaves and strangers in a strange land. Therefore, what we need to be as if reminded, be able to empathize with a stranger in a strange land. of all the things that we know about that's offered and told to the people at this point, when you think about what's going on now in our country, a country founded on strangers, this country is founded on people who came on boats, on airplanes, our families, running away from places where they had limited lives, control, punishment, death. And now what we're creating, yesterday I saw something in the news that just brought tears to my eyes. A young immigrant child who killed herself, 11 years old, because she was being taunted by other students of her reality and that her parents were going to get picked up and taken away. I mean, what is happening in Mishpatim is the creation of a society of people to have kindness and compassion built into the laws. And yes, she was bullied to the point where she took her life. And what we do know is that the percentage of young people who take their lives has risen beyond imagination. The amount of depression and sadness out through the roof. This is a reflection of creating a society that lacks compassion and care. And it starts at the top. So we are in this moment in Torah, coming off the right brain, this unbelievable, I don't know why this recording has been paused. I apologize. I didn't realize it was for me to do. It's going back on. So just to repeat, Yitro creates this unbelievable alive experience for these released slaves. But now we come to a place where, okay, you got to live, you got to have your feet on the ground, you have to become a citizen, a human being, you have to create a society that makes sense, where participation is built on limits and boundaries of things that can be done and not done. And all the things that Judaism values, the morals, the ethics, the values are infused in these mishpatim, ve'ele, and these, along with what you just experienced, the power and the awe of God's presence, of God's words, of this experience that's almost out of body. It's so profound that right here is how it's all coming together. We are reminded that through actions to respect and honor the other and their property, their land, their animals, everything that one owns, other people needed to have a sense of respect. It says that if you see your enemy's ox wander off, it's your responsibility to go out there. I think it was Jonathan, somebody talking about the garbage being left, that it's our responsibility. It teaches us that even if you have an enemy, this was amazing to me, even kindness to the enemy when things are occurring. It says that if you see your enemy's ox, this is your enemy, wander off or is burdened by something too much for them to deal with, you need to go and lighten the burden. The initial laws were an aid to create kindness, understanding, and peace amongst the people through the laws. By enacting the behavior, it would discourage hatred and distance between people. In Pirkei Avot, which is written, 1,000, 1,500 years later, Pirkei Avot says Make the property of your fellow as precious to you as your own. The rabbis take what's being written here and they turn it into these unbelievable teachings. Here's another one. Let the honor of your fellow be as precious as your own. These laws are developing a society that builds in values and morality by action. It's so profound. And when you live in what we're living with now, it's the same thing, but it's teaching horrific things. It's okay to lie. It's okay to steal. It's okay to round up people, even if they don't need to be. It's okay to bribe and to barter with human beings. You do this for me and I'll do this for you. This is the society we are living in. I don't care whether you're on one side or the other. What's being created in the world that we live in are values and a morality where a young child at 11 has to take her life because what's coming down from the top is hatred of the stranger. What are we taught in Mishpatim? You were a stranger. You know what that's like. Don't treat other people that way. That is foundational in Judaism. In order to create peace and harmony, you got to live out a sense of empathy and compassion, which is what we are losing at a most basic level in our society. And Judaism is confronting us and saying, hey, this is the very foundation. The moment you leave that awesome experience, your right brain experience, your left brain has to be it has to be pulled in. It has to learn. It has to know. Remember that the people in, not in Yitro, well, it was in chapter 19. It talks about things that are required. And the people all immediately say, what? Na'aseh, we'll do it. And then later they say, Na'aseh v'nishma. What's the difference? They immediately are ready to do things, but now they're saying, yeah, we need to do them, but we also have to have an understanding. Shema means to listen and pay attention. We have a shift, and what's happening is this shift from Yitro to Mishpatim. And the V at the beginning of the portion is saying they're joined together. The right and the left brain have to function together. The experiential and the wisdom and the knowledge have to function together. The behavior and the understanding of how we need to be human beings in this society need to function together. So if you have some comments, please, because I realize pretty soon I have to read our lists and do Kaddish with you. So if you have anything you want to say at this moment, please. Is there anything that this strikes for you? You know, Chabad, it was one of the things I wanted to point out. You know, Chabad is really about doing and then understanding. That's their philosophy. That's why they go out into the streets and they teach people who know nothing about Judaism how to put on tefillin and how to light the candles. Ray, yes, please.
Thank you. And I am just going to make an observation that I think the reason possibly for some of our silence, including mine for a moment, is we all know that we have to go on to Kaddish and that there is time to just open a door, peek in a room, and close it right away again. And the challenges we are, especially in this moment, facing are so monumental that it is too daunting for me to know what to do with 20 seconds and the problems we are facing. So I think I will just acknowledge that I think our silence might speak spectacular volumes about our predicament, and isn't just because folks are shy. It's because we are in an extraordinary moment, and figuring out where to move forward from it is possibly the biggest challenge we face in a generation, if not in our nation's history, at least since the Civil War.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, I'm not insulted by your silence. I understand it is, we are living in very, very challenging times, and the onslaught is constant. It's minute to minute, day to day. We do learn in Judaism that doing often comes before knowing, and we are being asked to do whatever we can, whatever we can figure out for ourselves. My husband has medical challenges. We can't go out and be in, large groups of people, but we can make phone calls, or we can use our pulpit and our teachings, to motivate and stir people, which is part of what the rabbi's role is as well. It is so important in this day and age. There was a time when we were taught politics doesn't belong in the synagogue. But we're in a very, very challenging time, and it always reminds me of the prophets of old, right? They were those people who spoke out against the rulers, the kings, and the people themselves, who were doing horrific things to each other, because they do blame the destruction of the temple on the people, and what they call sinat chinam, this baseless hatred of which we are living amongst as well. And all we can do is find what little pieces we can contribute, and all together it adds up. So I just invite you to, whatever it is, write letters, make phone calls, encourage neighbors, support yourself and others to realize that we have the ability to respond in whatever way it is, and not to shy away and not to be afraid. That's really important in a time like this, because part of what we're living with is being intimidated. It's about intimidation, and as Jews, we've had enough of that. So yes, Eric, did you want to say something? Oh, you have done.
A lot of people, I'm autistic level 1. I can take care of myself basically, but people like me don't want to talk to people because they're afraid to be insulted and misunderstood. We're the autism level 1 people are very kindly and all that stuff, but people don't give us a chance to communicate our feelings and expose ourselves to the world because of the defensive mentality we all have.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I think the beauty of what's happening here is that you're in a very welcoming community, that we have given you a voice. But in the society itself, people are shut down and people are afraid, and they mistreat other people to the point where they feel isolated, lonely, and it is one of the number one killers. Truly, that's what the research is showing. For people often die away because of the lack of compassion, care, familiarity, and concern. So with that, I apologize. I do need to read some names, and we will say Kaddish for those of you who are still here. I thank you all for your kind openness and permitting me to share with you who I am. And I look forward someday to other ways in which we will interact. So let me at least mention the names. There are people who did pass away this month. It is a sadness for the families. Jamshid Avraham Bina, Sila Horn, Stan Inkeles, Donald Lowe's, Adrian Rosenbaum Jacobson, Karen Rund, and Arlene Salkin. And we have yortsites this week. Rachel Almo, Lucy Armel, Salvo Bahar, Lionel Bell, Josie Bergman, Matilda Bernstein, Edward Blum, Anne Natriba Brock, Thelma Chessel, Jenny Chortak, Benjamin Cohen, Betty Ann Dancer, Barry Dean, Max Dahl, Jean Engel, Trude Ernstova, Lawrence Feinstein, Edward Fenton, Harvey Fields, one of your rabbis, Haskell Fleischer, Constance Foley, Sam Gilbert, Ginger Glazer, Sidney Goldberg, Harry Goldberger, Celia Goldman, Barry Golan, Rhoda Goose, Jack Gorby, Lillian Ansel Gottlieb, Rose Gottlieb, Edward Greenberg, Martin Greenberg, Albert Greenfeld, David Grover, Sam Halem, Milton Heskell, Diane Hirsch, Arnold Holstein, Dolores Jane, Kiki Kelrick, Thomas Kirk, Norman Klein, Melville Colrider, Peter Koppelson, Sylvia Salita Krausen, Janina Lauterbach, Gerald Levitt, Leslie Leventhal, James Levitch, Samuel Lipkin, Sarah London, Sarah Mankoff, Paula Marenberg, Ilona Marston, Augusta Marks, Joseph Mason, Irving Miller, George Mincer, Arthur H. Nadel, Harvey Knight, Hazel Ormiston, Arnold Palmer, Robert Van Petten Polly, Dorothy Belsinger Phelps, Edward Phillips, Gail Preiser, Bertie Faye Raff, Evelyn Reb, William Rosenberg, Sonia Rosenblum, Erwin Sachs, Ida Saltzman, Miriam Zeisel Schrops, Rose Schwimmer, Leonard Sobalski, Arnold Serban, Samuel Schaefer, Dennis Shapiro, Anna Schumann, Sanford Sigaloff, Francis Silverman, Louis Silverstein, Nachman Silverstein, Sheldon Silverstein, George Simon, Saul Slan, Henrietta Stern, Henry Sussman, Etta Tamkin, Sylvia Taylor, Mina Tuller, Gerald Waller, Margaret Varsovsky, Aaron Weiner, Etta Wiseman, Hyman, Michael Wynn, Arthur Winning, Bernard Yeager, Soma Yaguda, Sam Yesko, and Georgette Yusuf Mir. Let me share the Kaddish page so we can see it together. Just move things around. Let's just get rid of you and let's bring this up. Yitgadol v'yikadash shemei Rabba. V'yalma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol be'Yisrael. Bagala v'zman tariv v'yamru. Amen. Yahei shmei Rabba mevorach leolam u'omei almaya. Yibarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shamei d'kudashah brichu. Le'ela mikol b'chata v'shirata. Tush b'chata v'nechemata. Dam miram b'yoma v'yimru. Amen. Yahei shlomo rabba min shumaya. V'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. Osei shalom b'mromav. Huya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. Thank you all. Be well. Have a wonderful Shabbos and take care.
Thank you, Rabbi Robbins. We look forward to having you again. It was a nice 4 sessions.
I'm glad. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.